My name is Audun Ytterdal, pronounced like how you doing really quickly. I'm head of operation at VGNet, and before that I worked in LinPro, the company that also produced Varnish to begin with. VarnishLog, which is Norwegian largest newspaper in both in print and online. It was established by the members of the resistance movement shortly after the occupation in 1945. It's been online since 1995. It's got 1.4 million unique daily visitors, peaks at 2.5 million unique visitors, which is quite a lot since Norway has 5 million people, which means that every single adult in Norway is at that site at any point, at least once a day. We got 11 million daily page impressions, peaks at 61 million page impressions. We got about 3 gigabits of HTTP traffic going through Varnish, peaks at around 8 gigabits, and usually around 20 gigabits of video, and peaks at 146 gigs of video, SD. And it's currently now 1,500 HTTP requests right now. Is it 50,000 HTTP requests right now. We just use that during the VStat I'm going to show you later.
So, have I won my bet yet?
Which one?
Are you delivering 1 gigabit from any one box now?
We have, when we are dosing ourselves because someone did something stupid, at several occasions. And it's also the Varnish project origin. History. In 1995, VG was released online. It was a separate company called VG Multimedia, which stayed until last year. We were merged back into the newspaper. The product is called VGNet and was running on SGI Indy, running Perl 4 and CGI. Journalists were using Emacs. 1999, we had 3 squids on FreeBSD, hex-based CMS, and both as a CMS and a DB, and we're running on a Sun Enterprise. 2005, we had 8 squids and a lot of issues. Cash flow, we tried a lot of commercial things like cash flow and blue coat servers, and something had to be done. And my predecessor, Anders Berg, wrote a specification on what he really wanted to have in a cache, in a web accelerator. And we talked to Henrik Nordström, which was then the main maintainer of Squid, and said, if we give you a lot of money, would you fix it? And he kind of didn't convince him at all, because he wanted to focus to being a normal proxy. Anders Nordby at Aftenposten gets involved as well, and he knew Paul Henning, and he approached Paul Henning with the idea. We secured some fundings from VG, 1 million Norwegian kroners, and a year, and we approached LinPro for handling the project. And in July 2006, Varnish 0.8 is live on vg.no. In September 2006, Varnish 1.0 is released. 1.0 really only worked on VG and nothing else. If you try to put it in front of anything else, it just crashed. Our setup, it's 2 sites for redundancy, 2 separate hosting providers. 98% of the traffic is local to Norway, so CDNs doesn't really make any sense. We own our own PA range, provider-independent range, so we can move between providers, which gives us bankruptcy redundancy, because we've been having provided hosting provider that goes bankrupt earlier, and then it's really not really fun to move all the service within one day. We have short contracts and good leverage, because we can then move between providers pretty quickly. We use Akamai and Availo for video streaming, just because we use Akamai because that's the only CDN that actually has machines within the ISPs in Norway. Because the common NICs in Norway can't handle more than around 80 to 100 gigabits per second. And we use Amazon for planned bursts. Like, for example, when they give in Norway every year, people can look at their taxes, and then we have to have a large amount of machines. We use F5 big IPs, 2 of them. That terminates most HTTP and HTTPS traffic. Destination nets most of the traffic, and source nets some of the traffic. And it mitigates most of the SYN attacks. Most people putting Linux boxes with Varnish directly on the internet and got SYN attacks usually go down, while the F5 usually handles that. The Varnish cluster is 6 production servers and 1 staging server, and 5 to 6 local installations in front of APIs and stuff, running on HP blades with 32 gigs of RAM, and we deploy using just SVN and make files and rsync. We purge with a PHP script, which takes post and get parameters. At some point will be written in Node.js. It can't really ban yet.
Don't.
Hmm?
Don't.
Don't ban?
No, don't use Node.
Well, we use Node for a lot of stuff, a lot of the live coverages. So I can just put in a URL, for example, the front page of VG, and just purge all of them. As you notice here, they're actually purging every machine 2 times. That's because of having a hash for A and B testing, which I will come back to later.
Did you just do that?
Yes.
Let me just say, this is the best site I've ever developed software for. It's like, yeah, let's just try it.
We deploy code at least 30 to 50 times a day on production. So we kind of just roll back if it doesn't really work. It's always been like a feature of VG. For example, when the tsunami hit in Thailand, from the tsunami hit to we actually programmed the application and which you can search for survivors and stuff. It took 2 hours and it was just online. And it took the Norwegian Foreign Ministry 2 weeks. And for example, at the volcano in Iceland, we had an application where people can hitchhike around Europe in 1.5 hours. But which means that we deliver a lot of really crappy code and really crappy caching, and we just fix it afterwards. Yes. We do device detection for same URL, different content. In VCL receive, we just call identify device. I don't know if you can see this, but then we just set, like he mentioned earlier, just set XVG device to PC if it's not one of the, there's a PNG and GIF, if it's actually HTML file. We say set this device, and then just do some regexp based on what kind of device it is, just pretty crude. And then in fetch, we use this and put this into the vary header. And then on the way out, we remove it again. But we add the vary on user agent afterwards on the way out, because then the caches around like the local proxy squids thingies will still just cache per user agent. So people don't say never use cache by user agent, but we do on the way out, but not internally. I think there's an official VCL for this now, the identification of devices. I think there's at least 2 extra modules that do see stuff with Verful and things like that. We don't use that. As I mentioned earlier, we use vary user agent versus cache control private. Cache control private would be fine, and that's what people said that you should use instead of user agent. But then you couldn't really use, you wouldn't help the caches out there, the squids that are around the world. And as I mentioned earlier, if you vary on anything else than user agent and gzip thingy, I don't remember the content type, accept encoding, IE will just throw away its local cache. So we did that, and suddenly we increased traffic by many times. It's hard to keep these regex updated because new devices come all along, especially Android stuff. So we might go over to a module type of this later. We use New Relic for RealUser full stack measurement. And we just have some C code to inject when a request is started to work with, so we can actually measure the request queuing, which you can look up on afterwards. Should really be at the big IP in front, which is also doing a little bit of queuing. And what it leaves us is a full stack result of how the page behaves. So here you see request queuing, how much is used in PHP, how much is used in the database, how much is in memcache, how much is in web external. And also, you can look from the user perspective and see how much is request queuing, how much is web application, how much is network, how much is DOM processing, and how much is page rendering. And it's usually here we have to tune stuff, not necessarily Varnish, since our page looks like a Christmas tree. We choose backends. We have hundreds of, well, not hundreds, we have 30s of backends. So we have, since we've been online since 1995, there's around 130 machines, and none of them are especially alike. And they serve all kinds of different services. VG is just one of the sites, that's the biggest one, but VG has at least a few hundred sub-applications, and then we also serve a few other newspapers and other types of sites. We do it for DOS attacks, we do it for search bots, and we do it for sudden interest in 1998 football results. So for example, here you could say we just pull out the article ID of an article, and then we just set XVG article to then just set a header with the article ID. And then we have used the variable module to keep the highest number of in article at any given time, the highest actual article. And then we just check if the article that is requested is less than 250 less than the newest article, meaning that this is an older article, and then we just send it to a crappy backend, which means that we won't set so when Google comes and just crawls us, it uses the shiny backend for the new articles, and the crappy backends when it start really hammering us. It's not really in production because I just did that a few days ago. Then I figured out that the article IDs is actually random. But the new system, the new backend we're doing is not random. So we can then just, if you, for example, have nice URLs, we can actually just cut them up and see which date it is today, and then just use that to which backend we send them. A bit of it should be moved to VSL fetch, because then we can check if it's actually 200 OK with an article ID, and then set the global highest, which has been fetched from backend. But I haven't done that yet. And it's it's a small problem, and it's a mutex on var global get, which means that if you have a lot of them for a lot of requests, you might have slowdowns. But it's really cool to keep those values across all threads and just check for them if there's anything you can compare them with, which can meaning sending them to somewhere else. Oops. Did I? A and B testing. Here we do in VCL receive, just do a std random, and if it's 1 of 1,000, we just set an extra HTTP header. You win, and then in hash, we can then just use the hash with the if that header is set. We can just use vary for this as well, but I'm just showing that there's 2 different ways of doing it. Vary is much better because when you then purge, you purge all variants of that. But I think you mentioned that if you ban, you still only ban one of them. Is that correct?
No.
You ban both of them?
Yeah, but if you set the TTL of the object to 0, just remove that particular variant.
Okay, so setting TTL to something to 0 will only do it for one, but if you do it with purge, you do it for all.
Yeah, and ban also.
Okay. Then you need cache control private, because then you have to have sort of people actually, that type of person get that type of page. And you need to purge twice, because you need to purge and faking the header to purge for that version as well. Security stuff, a few VCL tricks. When people use HTTP expect, it's usually just because they want to do cross-site scripting stuff. So just kill that. We get attacked a lot, and I'm a bit scared right now because Anonymous is starting the largest attack in Sweden and probably also Norway since forever, according to them. And we got hit pretty badly by them last time, and now they're doing that today as well. I just read it in the news. What we do is for the web logic stuff, they have some URLs, they post to slash, they use like random IDs, and we just fence them off in VCL. And there's just some crude SQL thingy, so which are people trying to put SQL into it, you just stop it at in Varnish. There was actually someone called Gabriella Union, so we had to special case her. Paywall. VG isn't doing this, but we have a lot of smaller sites, something called Dine Penger, which is more like an economic magazine. They wanted to create paywalls, and we thought that Varnish would be a really good way to handle that. So the goal was for Dine Penger and plus VG.no, which is more like an iPad thingy, should pay for certain articles on some sites. So so some of the articles should be open, other ones should be closed. And some of them should just be open for a while and stuff like that. And we want to cache both paying and non-paying customers. And we wanted the subscriptions. We wanted to say it's OK if you come from Facebook. We wanted the article limits, meaning that you can see it's maybe like 20 articles, and then you have to wait for a few days, and similar things like that. And we contacted Varnish software, and they wrote a lot of VCL and a small, tiny vmod as well. So what we do is we just, from the backend, we just say access control subscription, and then we give them a few PIDs, which is kind of subscriptions that these types of subscription allowed to see this page, and then we give them a failed page. So if there's no SP access control header, cache as normal. If it's subscription, parse cookie, which is like we have a login system across a lot of our sites, and we parse that cookie, we parse the PIDs, and check with the auth system, which is a HTTP call from Varnish. And from Varnish will that check if these users have access to these kinds of PIDs, and then we'll cache the response for that user. And then it can deliver cached content for paying users. So we cache everything that for logged in users as well, but two different paths. Works flawlessly, it's simple, it's extremely cheap. We got a really good deal from Varnish software. It's extendable, and it's 95% VCL, and it's thanks to Varnish software. vStatD. It's a new thing I've been playing with, which is made by Varnish software as well, which is Debug Heaven. Because Varnish, for a user of Varnish, not a developer, Varnish is really, really hard to debug. It doesn't give you much information, just gives you a lot of things that's very interesting for Paul Henning, usually. And I've been kind of moaning about that for Varnish software for many years, and they're trying to put stuff into VarnishLog, but it doesn't really solve my problem. But then suddenly one of the employees come up with a really cool alternative version, which is vStatD. Have anyone tried it? Is it
Only you.
Only me. Okay. So it's actually pretty simple, and actually doesn't have anything to do with Varnish, sort of. It's just that you use std-log to log a special key. And you use like the first part of the P is a keyword, and the next part of the key is like just a hash, sort of. And then you just log to the VarnishLog, and that's everything that Varnish has to do with it. But then there's a small daemon on all my Varnish services that parse the shared memory log, and then pulls out all these vStatDs, do some short aggregation, and use 0MQ to push it to like a main server, and put it into buckets of a certain time. And then you can and this little daemon that it sends to has a little cute C HTTP API, so you can do cool stuff with. So this is what I do in deliver. If object hits is larger than 0, I don't do anything actually. That's something else. I just set a header. But if there's a miss, I send a key called vstat key, which is always has to be in there, and then miss total. And then I set a miss param, which is sending miss param plus the host plus the request URL plus the backend. And then if it's miss no param, I just say the rec HTTP host request, and then I regex away everything, all the parameters. And then after that, for both of the cases, I send a deliver total and a deliver host, which actually gives deliver host plus just the host of the request. And in VCL receive, if there's an article mentioned and the host is vg.no, I just add article ID and then the full URL to the article. And also article ID with the referrer, which means that I now can, you don't really see the, I have to do, here. So this is just the interface. It just gives you JSON. So I can, for example, say miss top 30, which is the total miss. I can also say star vg.no, which is because this is a regexp. So then it gets a top list, the top 30 of all the hits, all the miss no param. It actually just checks for miss. So if I want to have the miss no params, oops, no.
Param 8.
No. Where did I? Anyway, here it works. So here is all the VG with no param. So this one is really just sending backwards. It's got, this is buckets of 10 seconds. So within 10 seconds, this file here is sent backwards because it's a miss to the backend, to static. And then you can also do stuff like looking at which most the art ID, for example. This is the most popular article right now. And it's got 49 hits within the last 10 seconds. Which means that you can, now when we're making like the cool most active article list, we can just get them straight away because it doesn't cost anything to produce these lists. So we have real-time data of all what's going on the site. And an even cooler thing is actually, if you look at, go to miss again, and instead of top, use top time to first byte. This is the slowest backend calls. So this is really slow, serving at 2.19 seconds. And this serves at 2 seconds. So you can actually, it's really good way to check for debugging. And since VCL can be reloaded, you just, if you want to debug something, you just add a log and the information there, and it just pops up here. It's absolutely wonderful. And that's what I'm using now for my presentation. The updating updating stuff is actually just me doing an Ajax request to deliver total. And this is actually accessible for you now, so if you want to just go there and test. I had to, because for the presentation, so if you want to play with it, just go to vg.no/match and go wild. It's actually got one more cool thing, and it's, if I go to deliver, oops. Let's go to backend again. Miss no param. Why am oh, sorry. And then I write size, which is actually the largest object fetched from the backend listed. Yes, back to the presentation. Oops, that was a long way back to the presentation. Oh. Oh. So that's pretty cool. Performance. Synthetically, Varnish handles at least 100,000 K hits at least. In the real world, it's more in the range of 10 to 15 hits per 1,000 hits per second. And it's actually starting to have issues, at least at us, when it reaches 7, 8. Not necessarily bad. It still handles up to, say, 15 to 20, but it's doing funky stuff. So we prefer to keep servers under 7K hits per second. Oh, I just had to put it back in the real one, the real-time one. The major thing you have to remember is put varlib varnish on tempfs. If you don't do that on Linux, it just your performance just goes down the toilet. Varnish parameters which we run with is only special things here is usually send timeout, which you need. Otherwise, you'll just stop. That's actually fixed in 303, I think. But if you run anything but 303, you need a higher send timeout. We also have to add this and thread pool workspace. Otherwise, we segfault we as well. I can write stuff here.
You're not running that.
No, it's not. That's not actually production. This is the syscontrol.conf file for Varnish. This is just black magic. We just try stuff and see what happens. And I really would like to just share with other people what kind of sys settings you do. Some people say they have no problems handling like 400,000 syns per second, while we kill machines with much less. But usually people fix a lot of the Linux limits here.
One good thing to know about these is that some of them, I think like netdev max backlog, don't go over 65535 because some of them are cast into shorts in the Linux kernel, on Linux that is, and then if you go over, you get really weird side effects and things do not work as expected.
And you also got other cool things. Some settings are really cool unless you're behind a load balancer. Then it does funky stuff. I don't remember, but it's one of the time wait thingies which you shouldn't really be touching if you're running behind a load balancer. But anyway, I want to discuss this with you guys later. I'm short on time and people are hungry, I guess. The future, current issues and wishes for Varnish and surrounding tools. We got issues with pipelining. Since iOS 5 got out, they've got the very aggressive pipelining, and which in a heavy image site, you get mixed and repeat images, which is really scary for a new site because suddenly there you have the image of the prime minister and he killed someone, and it doesn't really look really good. And we tried to investigate this a lot, and we don't know if it's Varnish, if it's Big IP, if it's iOS, or if it's anything. But we thought it was Varnish for a while, and then we thought it was a Big IP for a while, then we thought it was iOS. But then we found a bug in Firefox and Opera and Chrome as well. So, and we got a lot of attention. We wrote a blog post about it, and it got a lot of attention, and Facebook people had the same problem. And I mentioned it in Velocity yesterday, and people had the same problem there. And it's not solved, because it looks like the more aggressive, if you're a really bad line and you're really aggressively pipelining, images get mixed up. It's really, if you want to dig into it, you want to look at it, this is the URL. It's default off on most desktop browsers. You don't see it there. The other one is iframe mix-ups in Firefox. So we want to do ads, but the problem is if to do that quickly, you have to put in iframes, but iframes in Firefox switches places, which is just...
Yeah, with the main page, right?
Yes, also the main page. We have like about, say, 15 ads. So usually it's between ads. That's OK. But if you switch the main content with one of the ads, it doesn't really look very good. I talked to one of the Mozilla guys yesterday, and they knew of it, and they haven't, but have a problem fixing it because it's only for really large sites, and it's hard to debug, and the pipelining is even harder to debug because you can't really figure out what's happening synthetically. Varnish, what I want in Varnish, warn when it runs out of resources, if that's possible. For example, if you're running out of file descriptors, please tell us. Squid was really good at that. It told you you're reaching a limit and try to adjust this number. Varnish doesn't do that at all. I would really like to access timeout errors from VCL. I want to access everything from VCL. And I also want to access statistics, Varnish stat from VCL. So for example, number of hits per second, I would like to expose that through a synthetic page in Varnish. Your unused backends should be a warning, not an error. Because we're doing so much stuff and trying us out, and then you have to comment both the code and the backend, and it's just not necessary.
Same with ACLs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything.
Everything. It's like the warnings are okay. Errors are usually not okay. And we really want a status page because it's nice to use Varnish as a load balancer, but it's really a black box when it comes to load balance. You don't really know what's going on, what's the status of the backends and stuff like that. That's why we use Big IP, because it gives a much better overview of it. vStatD, the things I want in that is summarize across buckets. I also want to summarize across substrings, meaning that I don't need to add all of those different hashtags, because I would just want to say I want to summarize across the first bit of the string. And I want different size buckets in one installation, and I want it to return JavaScript, because that's the problem I had now. If I'm going to query it without, it has to be same site. So if you can make it return JavaScript, you can do JSON-P stuff. VarnishLog, I would really like to clean up debug there, because that's, when we try to run VarnishLog in production, it's really painful. It kills the terminal. And it's a lot of debug information. There's a lot of unnecessary information that doesn't really help us. And I also want to know why a request failed. Was it a timeout? Was it a connect timeout? Was it time to first byte? Was it time between bytes? Was it the 500 from the backend? Was it because the connection was just closed without anything happening? Was it anything else? Was it an eternal ulimit? Was it one of the parameters that went haywire? Varnish MCA, want -b to work again, because that's actually the most useful part of Varnish SCA. Just run it with -b and look at what backend request in the Apache format. But a lot of this is mitigated with vStatD, for me at least. Thanks. That's me. If you want to look at the slides, they're here. And it actually even works on iPhones and Android phones. So, any questions? Yes.
Thanks. I'm just really interested in finding out more about this vStatD thing. It's the first I'd heard of it. What's is it yours or is it?
Jonathan,
Varnish's?
No, it's not going to be open source.
But, okay, but it's going to be available commercially.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's not released yet. I mean, he's the only user.
Is there a timescale for when it's going to be commercially available?
He always tests anything we give him.
Thanks.
We're looking at the first release for vStatD within this month. So, yeah. We're looking at doing the first release of vStatD within this month, and if people, if customers sign up, they can have access to it before that, but obviously it's then going to be, you can try this, it might break. If it breaks, we'll help you fix bugs. Well, we'll fix bugs, but no guarantees, so.
Any other questions? Yes. Poor man has to run with the microphone.
Will you switch back to the wish list?
Wish list, yeah.
Just a quick comment. I think it's about the wish list. There is a command line parameter, VCC_ref, that turns unused backends and other unused back things from an error into a warning.
I didn't quite catch that. Sorry.
The last point, the second to last point here, unused backends. There's a command line parameter that will do it for you.
Ooh, I didn't know that.
VCC_ref. Just discovered it recently. It's a godsend.
Hooray!
It was added by your request ages ago.
Okay, I kind of wished for it and didn't notice then. Any more questions? No? Food and coffee then, I guess. Or
Yeah.